Who added 2 years or more of university were likely to get good jobs and have their incomes grow. Younger Americans who didn't go to university at all were likely to get jobs where their incomes declined and were much more likely to be unemployed. And the more advanced China's economy becomes, the more that will be true of China. The more you will need very large numbers of people getting university education and technical education. So I think it is very, very important. Now, let me say one expectation I have for the younger generation of Americans and Chinese that has nothing to do with economics. One of the biggest threats to your future is a world which is dominated not by modern problems, but by ancient hatreds. Look around the world and see how much trouble is being caused by people who dislike each other because of their racial or their religious or their ethnic differences. That whether it's in Bosnia or the conflict between the Indians and the Pakistanis, or in the Middle East, or the tribal conflicts in Africa, you look all over the world, you see these kind of problems. Young people, I think, are naturally more open to others who are different, more interested in people who are different. And I hope young people in China and young people in America who have good education will be a strong voice in the world against giving in to this sort of hating people or looking down on them simply because they're different. Thank you.
总统先生，关于民主、自由和人权的问题是中美两国人民都很关注的问题。但是坦率地说，在这方面咱们两个国家有不少分歧。您刚才在您的演讲中对美国的建设民主自由的历史做了一个比较自豪的回顾，而且对中国人民
made a proud introduction to the American construction of democracy. We are welcome to these frank opinions, but I think China and the world people have to remember, bear in mind criticism and self-criticism. Self-criticism. I want to know if you also have some problems relating to democracy and human rights. What policies have you taken recently in this regard?
I do, and first of all, let me say I never raised this question overseas in any country, not just China, without acknowledging first that our country has had terrible problems in this area. Keep in mind, slavery was legal in America for many years, and that we are still not perfect. I always say that, because I don't think it's right for any person to claim that he or she lives in a perfect country. We're all struggling toward ideals to live a better life. So I agree with the general point you made. Now, I will give you two examples. We still have some instances of discrimination in America in housing or employment or other areas based on race. And we have a system set up to deal with it, but we have not totally eliminated it. And in the last year, I have been engaging the American people in a conversation on this subject. And we have tried to identify the things that government should do, the things that the American people should do either through the local government or through other organizations, and the attitudes that should change the minds and hearts of the American people. So that's one example. Now let me give you another example. When I ran for president in 1992, I was in a hotel in New York City, and an American immigrant from Greece came up to me, and he said, "My son is 10 years old, and he studied the election in the schools, and he says I should vote for you. But he said, if I vote for you, I want you to make my son free, because my son is not really free." So I asked this man, what do you mean? And he said, well, the crime is so high in my neighborhood, there are so many guns and gangs, that my son does not feel that I can't let him walk to school by himself or go across the street to play in the park. So if I vote for you, I want you to make my son free. I think that's important because, you see, in America, we tend to view freedom as the freedom from government abuse or from government control. That is our heritage. Our founders came here to escape the monarchy in England. But sometimes freedom requires affirmative steps by government to give everyone an equal opportunity to have an education and make a decent living and to preserve a lawful environment. So I have worked very hard to try to bring the crime rate down in America, and it's now lower than it has been at any time in 25 years, which means that more of our children are free. But the crime rate is still too high. There's still too much violence. So we Americans need to be sensitive not only to preserve the freedoms that we hold dear, but also to create an environment in which people can build a truly good and free life. That's a good question. There's another man right there.
总统先生，欢迎您来北大。
Welcome you
您曾经提
to
过，
Beida.
是说不要为了国家的自由牺牲自己的自由。
Just now you mentioned that Mr. Hu Shi has said that don't sacrifice your own freedom for the country's own freedom.
而不相害。我并不认为为国家的自由就一定国家的自由和自己的自由有什么冲突。
I don't think there is any conflict in the country's freedom and the individual's freedom. I think freedom is someone's own choice, which suits yourself. It's like the prosperity and developed China has achieved now is the choice we have made, and it's the real freedom we are enjoying now. Don't you agree with my point of view? Only those who have freedom can respect somebody else's freedom.
No, I do agree with that. I agree. First of all, if you believe in freedom, you have to respect the freedom of others to make another choice. And even societies that have rather radical views of individual freedom recognize limits on that freedom when it interferes with preserving other people's rights. For example, there's one of our famous court cases which says we have freedom of speech, but no one should be free to shout the word fire in a crowded movie theater where there is no fire and cause people to stampede over each other. And there's another famous court decision which says my freedom ends where the other person's nose begins, meaning that you don't have the freedom to hit someone else. So I agree with that. People have the freedom to choose, and you have to respect other people's freedom, and they have the right to make decisions that are different from yours. And there will never be a time when our systems and our cultures and our choices will be completely identical. That's one of the things that makes life interesting. Want to take one more?
Last. 最后一个问题。
Want to take one more?
The last question.
总统先生，我想向你提两个问题。第一个问题是，美国经济持续80多个月以来都是非常高速的在增长。我想请问总统先生，这个除了您个人的对美国所做出贡献以外，请问还有哪些方面是美国经济成功的主要因素？或许这些对中国也是一个很好的借鉴。 第二个问题是，我想问总统先生，当去年中国主席江泽民在哈佛大学访问的时候
，When President Jiang visited Harvard,
在游行。那么我想请问总统先生，
there was a student demonstration
外面有
outside.
中国北大的学生在外面游行的话，请问您有何感想？谢谢。
What would you feel if students in Beida demonstrated outside?
Well, first of all, on the United States economy, I believe that the principal role of government policy since I've been president was to, first of all, get our big government deficit. We had a huge annual deficit in spending. We got that under control. We're about to have the first balanced budget in 30 years. That drove interest rates down and freed up a lot of money to be invested in creating jobs in the private sector. Then the second thing we did was to expand trade a lot. So we began to sell a lot more around the world than we had before. And the third thing we did was to attempt to invest more in our people, in research, development, technology, and education. Now, in addition to that, however, a lot of the credit here goes to the American people themselves. We have a very sophisticated business community. They were investing money in new technologies and in new markets and in training people. We have an environment where it's quite easy for people to start a business, and perhaps this is the area that might be most helpful to China. I know that my wife has done a lot of work around the world in villages, trying to get credit to villagers so they could borrow money to start their own businesses, to try to take advantage of some skill they have. And we have seen this system work even in the poorest places in Africa and Latin America, where opportunity takes off. So we have tried to make it easy in America for people to start a business, to expand a business, and to do business. And then we have also tried very, very hard to get new opportunities into areas where there were none before. And all these things together, but especially I give most of the credit to the people of my country. After all, a person in my position, we're supposed to have correct policies so that we create a framework within which the American people then create the future. And I think that is basically what has happened. Now, you asked me an interesting question. Actually, I have been demonstrated against quite a lot in the United States. I told President Zhang when he was there I was glad they demonstrated against him so I didn't feel so lonely. What I think is, I'll give you a serious answer. If there were a lot of people demonstrating against me outside, suppose they were demonstrating over the question that the first gentleman asked me. Suppose they said, oh, President Clinton is trying to interfere with the peaceful reunification of China and Taiwan, and he shouldn't be selling them any weapons, whatever. Well, I would try to find out what they were demonstrating against, and then I would ask my host if they minded if I would go over and talk to them, or if they would mind if one or two people from the group of demonstrators could be brought to see me and they could say what is on their minds, and I could answer. Remember what I said before about what Benjamin Franklin said. Our critics are our friends, for they show us our faults. You have asked me some very good questions today that have an element of criticism in them. They have been very helpful to me. They have helped me to understand how what I say is perceived by others, not just in China, but around the world. They have helped me to focus on what I can do to be a more effective president for my people and for the things we believe in. And so I feel very good that we have had this interchange, and from my point of view, the questions were far more important than my speech. I never learn anything when I'm talking. I only learn things when I'm listening. Thank you very much. Thank you.
In a moment, a news conference with representatives
of the 1989 pro-democracy movement in China to promote freedom. He received a standing ovation from students at Beijing University, whose predecessors led the democracy demonstrations in Tiananmen Square. In what's considered the keynote speech of his Chinese visit, the president called for a new relationship between China and the United States. He urged the Chinese government to respect and preserve human rights. And he reminded the students China's greatest resource is its people.
Today, we do not seek to impose our vision on others, but we are convinced that certain rights are universal, not American rights or European rights or rights for developed nations, but the birthrights of people everywhere, now enshrined in the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights. The right